Welcome to the Relaunch Your Career podcast. I am your host, Leah Lambert, career and interview coach and founder of Relaunch Me, where we help you find the work that you were meant to do. Welcome to episode 37 of the Relaunch Your Career podcast. I am your host, Leah, and today I am interviewing one of our Relaunch Me coaches, Lyndsay Shaw. Lyndsay has an extensive corporate background, commencing her career as an accountant with KPMG, sounds a little bit familiar, before transitioning into the graduate recruitment team and building a very successful career in graduate recruitment, training, facilitation, and leadership development of KPMG's partners and high potential talent. Welcome to the podcast, Lyndsay.
Thank you, Leah. Thanks so much for having me here today.
It's great to have you. And how are things up in beautiful Noosa today? I bet it's really horrible.
I would love to tell you that it's horrible, but it's absolutely beautiful today. It's a glorious 24 and sunny, but we do have some rain coming this week. So
that will make me feel much better. As you know, it is my favourite place in Australia, so I feel you're very lucky to live there.
Yeah. Very lucky. It was a COVID move and a really good move. So, yeah.
I'm sure it will be. Well, welcome to the podcast. And thank you for joining me to share your career story. Can you tell us how it all began?
Yeah. So going all the way back, when I think about it, I was actually pretty clued up as to what I wanted at school. So I knew I wanted to work with people. I knew I wanted to be in control of my time, something flexible. I knew I wanted to build something around a family. So I had all of that insight, but where I went wrong is I allowed other people to influence me and didn't really kind of stick to my gut. And my brother, who is 6 years older than me, he had gone and studied accounting based on my dad's advice. And when it was my turn, my dad said, well, you've got the capability to be an accountant, so you might as well go and do it while you're young, get the qualification, and then, the world's your oyster, he said, and you can go and do whatever you want after that. So, I listened, and what I did do is made sure that I went to one of South Africa's best universities. So I went down to Stellenbosch, which is in the Winelands, and studied a Bachelor of Accounting. And it was pretty much just on a robot path from there. We didn't even have one subject choice in the 4 years. So it was very prescribed. When it came time to choosing where I would want to do my training contract out of the big four, my brother had gone to KPMG and loved the culture and the people. So that was, again, an obvious kind of next step for me. And I just kept following that path without really thinking about whether this was right for me. Yeah. And that's how I started.
It sounds like a very, very familiar story. Just quickly, I'm interested to know, is your brother still an accountant?
He is. So I watch him with interest. He struggled more actually during the study. He found it harder, and he had a few setbacks. And I think sometimes those setbacks, when you have them and you still push through, is an indication of possibly that you're on the right path. But I do know that when he was growing up, he wanted to be a game ranger. So he really wanted to work in the game parks in South Africa. And again, my dad told him that there was no money. And so he is a successful CFO today, but he really still needs that fix. So he goes out in the bush on his own on weekends and just gets as much as what he can. To keep his cup filled, basically.
Yeah, wow, that would be pretty cool. And so you started in audit, I think, at KPMG. At what point do you think you felt maybe this isn't for me?
Yeah, so I was in audit, and I didn't even know which division to do my training in. So it came to we got a form, and we had to choose whether we wanted to do financial services or consumer products or industrial and automotive. And I had no clue, which is probably a first warning that this was not the right path. And I can remember my father-in-law saying to me, well, the obvious choice would be to go into financial services. That's going to be the most kind of successful, lucrative path that you could take, which was so wrong for me. I love tangibility. I should have gone to consumer markets. And I found myself in financial services. My first client was auditing a big treasury for an investment bank. Totally out of my depth. I didn't even, really know what a spot was or a curve base was. And, but just, I was really grown up to be very dedicated and driven and just kept going along. And I suppose the real clincher for me was when everybody around me started registering to study a CFA, so a Chartered Financial Analyst, which was the obvious choice for auditors working in financial services. But for me, it was the first time where, I kind of had that choice, and I was thinking, absolutely not. I'm not doing one more thing which I'm not interested in. And I can actually remember saying it to somebody. I said, the next thing that I study is going to be something that I love, something that I'm interested in. So, there was a real kind of trigger for me to go, I don't think I belong in this place. And I've really pushed myself, and I've, managed to do well and to keep up with everybody, but it's really not my passion or interest. And, other warning signs were as a second year at KPMG, they gave us the opportunity to become facilitators so that we could help facilitate training for the new graduates coming through. And I was so excited by that and really kind of made sure that I got into that program. Whenever there was an opportunity to go onto campus and speak to new students, I was pick me, get me out of audit for the day. So there were lots of signs like that. But it was at the end of that 3-year training contract, where I just really knew that this path was not the right one.
It sounds so familiar because I remember exactly the same thing. The parts that I enjoyed the most in those 3 years were going out and helping with graduate recruitment. So going out to careers fairs, and also I think remember bringing in, they had a graduate camp and they sent a group of us on camp, which obviously that was quite fun, but it was always the people side. But what kept me at KPMG for 4 years was the great people that I worked with, and the social side, which was, it was a fantastic environment. You were probably a bit the same.
Yeah, amazing. I mean, we started work in Johannesburg. We had at KPMG 150 audit grads, so we had all come straight out of uni. From that perspective, it was amazing and such a wonderful culture, and so many outside of work activities. So we had, an action cricket team, and we used to enter running races as, a corporate team, and swimming, and all sorts of things going on outside of the actual day-to-day auditing, which again has made me really enjoy KPMG for many years.
Yeah, they are certainly, and look, fantastic training grounds as well. Like, even if the content of the work wasn't exactly what inspired us, I'm sure you learned a lot in the process, as did I.
Yes, yeah. And the network is phenomenal too. So
at this point, you made a transition into graduate recruitment and learning and development. Can you tell us a little bit about your career path from there on, working in grad recruitment and at KPMG and Standard Bank running graduate programs?
Yeah, so as I mentioned before, it was, at that point at the end of the 3 years where I really had to stop and assess what it is that I wanted to do. And it was just lucky that at KPMG, they used to have a secondment opportunity for somebody who had just recently qualified to second into HR to run graduate recruitment for a 2-year secondment. So that was really lucky because, it gave me the option of stepping in and trying that out without kind of losing everything that I had done. So in that secondment, I had to keep 2 audit clients so that I was still kind of keeping one foot in that door in case I needed it. And I really fought hard to get that secondment. Like there was another candidate that was probably a front runner. And I really just did not give up. That's what I wanted. And I knew it. And, everyone was thinking I was a bit crazy. They were going on secondments globally to do audit secondments, or they were going to London to go and work in the investment banks. So what I was doing was completely out of the norm. That first week that I started in HR in grad recruitment was the first time that I'd gone to work with energy, like waking up on a Monday morning, not feeling that, that real drag of, oh, here we go with another week. So I just loved it from the start. And I think what I loved at KPMG and at Standard Bank was the real diversity of a graduate recruitment role. So no day is the same. One day you are strategizing about your branding proposition and how you're going to attract the graduates. Next thing, you've started your process and you're screening through the CVs, then you're doing your interview process, then bringing them through to assessment centers, selecting them, and then still I played a key role in that training. So training them up and getting them through induction and ready to go into the business. So it was really a full cycle of HR. And, a lot of people that I've worked with in HR that have gone on to be the heads of HR have actually come through grad recruitment because it deals with all facets of HR. And I suppose the real love of it was that it made such an impact. So, I felt like I was making an impact individually with students. They kind of look to you as their kind of hero because you're the person allowing them into this new world of work. But from a business perspective, you're also having such a big role to play. So especially at Standard Bank was a high talent program. So we used to have about 3,500 applications to choose 20 graduates. So that impact that you were having just really kind of filled me up. And the relationships that I was building with the business, so I would sit and propose strategies to the CEO of the bank. And there's not a lot of roles at a bank of 50,000 people that get to sit and have one-on-one time with the CEO. So, some people think, oh, it's just grad recruitment, but it really is a role that has a big impact in the business.
Yeah, that's very visible, isn't it? Because you also work very closely with the partners and senior managers because they're all involved in the recruitment process often as well.
Yeah, exactly.
So what was the next step after you ran those programs? I know you also moved into sort of more leadership development and working with high potential staff. Can you tell us a little bit more about that side of what you've done?
Yeah, so went on a bit of a journey. So I probably was fully in grad recruitment for about 7 or 8 years between KPMG and Standard Bank. And it definitely is, if I think back, what did I not like about the role? Probably nothing other than the fact that it is a young person's role because it's really, really busy and high intensity and lots of travel. And it's a full-time role. There's no kind of real way of making that part-time. So as soon as I had kids, the prospect of still doing that type of role wasn't what I was looking for because I wanted more of that balance and to be able to be available for, the family and the kids. So that caused, a need for a change and a transition. And at the same time, we moved from South Africa to Australia. So through it all at the same time, having kids and moving across. So I was actually really lucky when we did do that move. My boss at the time said to me, how can we still keep you involved? Because now you've gained all this experience and to lose that is just going to be a real loss to their team. And so together we worked up with a plan for me to do all the social media work for the graduate program from Australia. So they gave me a contract where I worked kind of 2 or 3 hours a day from home in Australia and really just communicating with graduates that were interested in the program. So I would run training sessions on Facebook, so do Facebook Lives, answer all their questions that were coming through. So that was a really good transition for me while I had kids and just lucky to have got that. And when that came to an end, I needed to look for something in Australia. So an obvious place for me to go back to was KPMG. And at the time, I was so lucky because there was a senior manager role in the audit learning team part-time, which just hardly ever comes up. So I saw it on Seek and I was like, oh my God, that is just meant for me. So that saw me transition back to KPMG, but more into a learning role as opposed to graduate recruitment. And initially was a very technical audit role. So I was going back into the standards and talking to the regulators and really having to put on a brave face and pretend that I knew what I was doing. But quickly, built relationships with the team there and showed my passion for kind of human behavior. And it wasn't long that they then pulled me into the more developmental side of the learning. So I started doing transition programs for kind of any stage that was moving into a new higher level. So, managers going into senior managers going to directors. It became a really interesting and fulfilling role.
So Lyndsay, at some point I know that you're very, you're working really hard. You're also a very active person running ultra marathons and crazy things like this. And then you encountered a major health setback, which led you to really reevaluate your life and your career.
Yeah.
Are you willing to share that story with us?
Yeah. So I can remember being teased when I was young by, friends of our parents and just saying, you never ever sit down. You're always busy. You're always on to the next thing, which I think is, when I look now and I've learned so much about Myers-Briggs, we use the profiling tool with our graduates and, I've got the qualification myself and I really enjoy the tool. But when I look now, I kind of understand where that all comes from. So I'm an ESTP and it absolutely fits who I am. It's high energy, it's go, it's lots of sport. So that's really how I've always been. And I grew up doing a lot of competitive swimming, and it's one of the things that you learn out of being a competitive sports person when you're young is discipline and time management. So you really learn how to maximize your day, and that's how I've always been, and kind of carried that through. Even when I had Michael, my oldest, I can remember being absolutely exhausted to the point that I was saying to other mums, I know everyone's tired, but like, should I be this tired? I was like, this is extreme. It still wasn't enough for me to slow down. So I just kept filling my life with everything possible. And it was in 2015, I did sign up for an ultramarathon back in South Africa. It was just coinciding with the wedding. And so, why not tag that along? And I did that and actually had a really good run. And after that, I just absolutely crashed. So we flew back to Australia the next day. My ankles swelled up like balloons. I was absolutely finished. And I went to see a naturopath and obviously lots of doctors. But I can remember the naturopath saying to me, you had this last little bit of energy left and you have now flattened it. And I was diagnosed with Hashimoto's thyroiditis. So it's an autoimmune disease which has antibodies that are attacking the thyroid, and the thyroid is basically the master controller of the body. So the biggest impact that it's had on me has been fatigue. And I really had to learn and take a lesson to know that my body was saying enough is enough and you need to slow down. So that was really right at the time that I had just started back at KPMG in the audit learning team. And as I said, it was such a lucky opportunity to get, a senior manager role part-time that I did not want to lose that. So I had to make a lot of changes to make sure that I could hold on to the work that I had. And so that involved dietary changes. It involved really slowing down on like social activities and choosing things like yin yoga, which I would never have done in my 20s, but it's one of my favorite things to do now. I had to stop running for at least 6 months. So I did everything I could to make sure that I could still show up at work, but still it was putting a lot of strain on me. So anyway, I can recall a day I used to live on the northern beaches in Sydney, and catch the E65 into the city. It took about an hour. And I can remember one day literally crying the whole way in, like I could not stop because I was just so tired and so overwhelmed and not sure how to keep it going. But luckily, I did have a really good relationship with my manager at KPMG and was able to have the conversations that I needed to have. So to say, this is what's going on, and I'm really doing everything that I can to get this Hashimoto's under control. But I know that my work needs to be kind of in sync with who I am. And there were elements, because it was a senior manager role, there was a lot of project management, a lot of stakeholders. So there was a lot of elements in that job that actually weren't my natural kind of skill set. And so we sat down and really stripped back, what is it that I really shine at? Because that's what's going to help bring the energy back for me and help get this Hashimoto's back into a controllable state. So, and we both identified that, for me, standing up, facilitating or coaching and working with people, that's where I come alive. And so I proposed the role of an associate facilitator. So, and I didn't even know what the term was at that point, but what I said to them was, I said, I love facilitating. You always need facilitators. You're going out to the business and you're really trying to get them out of the business to come and facilitate. I was like, I should just be somebody that you can call on, book me in. I know when I'm coming, I come and deliver the best of me. And when you don't need me, you don't have to pay me. So that, that was the solution that I'd come up with. And it didn't happen there and then. There's, as there is always in the corporate world, there's a lot of red tape and hurdles to jump through. But eventually that came to be. And I can remember from then, walking into the office on a day that I had been booked to facilitate and bumping into colleagues of mine, and they say, "Oh, you look so happy." And I was like, that's because I am. This is amazing. Like, just the real right fit for me. Yeah.
Wow. And like how, very fortunately had a manager who, I guess, helped you craft your current job rather than having to feel that you had to go and look for something else.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I think, and the learning that I've got from that is I'm a very open and honest communicator. I find it hard to hold anything back. But I think, dealing with others and coaching, you see how afraid some people are to share and be vulnerable. But at the end of the day, when something's not working, you might as well, because you've got nothing to lose. And yeah.
Exactly. I totally agree with that. So, Lyndsay, you now have what we like to call a portfolio career. You're living on the beautiful Sunshine Coast. You're coaching for Relaunch Me. You're working for Tour de Cure, and you're working as a swimming coach. Tell us how that all works for you and whether you would recommend it to others.
Yeah, so it definitely works for me and my personality. I, even though I've had the health setback and have made a lot of changes, I still like the energy. I still like to be busy. And I really value balance and diversity. So, I've got a lot of interests and I've got a lot of things that give me joy. And I like to be able to get that from different sources. So, if I was to be, things that give me joy is I love kids and I love working with kids, but I don't want to work with them 5 days a week full time, because I also like being intellectual and I like using learning, and I like working with adults. So I've crafted a situation where I'm getting enough of what I need. So I suppose if I break it down, there's kind of three key aspects of what I enjoy, and those are, I love sport. I've always loved sport, so having an involvement in the sporting world is good for me. And then I suppose even why graduate recruitment suited me so well is I love events and the learning and coaching side. So so sport, learning, and events are the three things that I love. And in this portfolio career, I'm getting something of all of those. So the Tour de Cure, I'm in the events team, and it's such a wonderful cause. So, and it involves sports, so that just like kind of ticks a lot of boxes. But again, if I was 5 days a week in events, it's very high stress and requires a lot of energy. So full time for me doesn't really work. And one of the biggest benefits of having a portfolio career is it's actually really, especially now during COVID, has helped me survive. So when COVID hit, KPMG stopped using any contractors. So I lost the contract that I had and loved with them. But it's been Tour de Cure that has carried me through COVID, because I was also working for them and then qualified for JobKeeper. And so, if it was that I just had KPMG, I would have been left with nothing. So that for me is a real benefit of a portfolio career, is that you can, at different times when you need to pull on whatever one is going to give back to you at that time. So
yeah, that isn't it such an important point. And I've actually spoken to so many clients who have realized, I guess, the benefits of having other things, I guess, on the side rather than relying on one source of income, if that's possible.
Yeah.
Can we go back, Lyndsay? You talked about Standard Bank and how it was such a competitive graduate program, 3,000 applicants for 20 places, which is actually not unusual at all. It's quite typical of investment banks, Big Four accounting firms, law firms, etc. I know you've been working with some of our younger clients, helping them prepare for graduate recruitment assessment centres and interviews. What advice would you have for students preparing for those processes? And more importantly, how can you help them prepare?
Yeah, so when I look at graduates and think about all those processes that I went through in the selections, the two things that really stand out for me for a graduate to be kind of rise to the top is, the first thing is how self-aware that graduate is. So, and when I talk about self-awareness, I mean, how well do they know themselves? Have they really kind of stopped and reflected and understood why it is that they're studying what they're studying? What are their strengths? What are their weaknesses? And they really know that. So it's not just something that they've kind of can spin off their tongue, but you can see that there's a real kind of inner awareness. And I suppose I'm really passionate about that, because that's actually what I didn't have. And I can, I look back and I can see now that that was not me. So you get a lot of graduates coming through that have gone to the right schools, they've gone to the right unis, they've done really well in their academic achievements, but they haven't had that reflection time. And in order to transition well into the corporate world and have the resilience that you need and the patience that you need, that self-awareness has to be there. Those self-aware grads are going to transition much easier and have a much better kind of success rate. So that's why it is so important to have that. And I think, and it doesn't take a lot. It just takes some to stop and reflect. So building in reflection as a daily practice is something that is going to help a graduate to stand out. And the other thing that really stands out is when somebody has had a rich experience to date as a graduate, and not just a rich experience, but they know why it was rich and what they learned from it. So a lot of the questions is behavioral interview questions that we coach at Relaunch Me, and I've had graduates that come in and sit in an interview, and you ask them, can you tell me about an example of where you've had a problem? And then they say, well, in my third year auditing project, this is the problem that we had. And then you ask them the next question about, team building, and they refer back to that same project. And, like every question that you ask, they only talk about that one experience. Whereas, the next graduate comes in and they pull on all these different experiences. So they tell you about a time, where they went traveling and the problems that they came up with and how they resolved them and the diversity that they learned from that travel. And then the next, example that they're using is about a time that they were involved in a community organization, and then the next one that they're talking about is that, a lesson that they learned from a job that they had. So somebody that has really sat back and thought about their life and where their key learning situations have been, it really goes a long way in standing out from the other graduates.
I totally agree. And I think you mentioned before, the right school and the right uni. I do think that sometimes young candidates who have gone to private schools and the best unis feel that that is enough to get them through, and they don't perhaps put the effort into the preparation. And, recruiters are going to be far more impressed with someone that has really had to fight for their place at university and has worked hard without everything being handed to them on a platter. And exactly, they know themselves well, and they also know, they've done their research and they know what area they actually want to work in and why they think it will suit them.
Yeah. And, so for the graduates out there that have been to the right school and have been to the right uni, they really have to think about how to position themselves to get away from just looking like they haven't had any struggle. And that's why, I always encourage, if you have been more fortunate, to go out there and put yourselves in situations which do challenge you. And that can come in many different ways. So sport is a way of challenging yourself, but, somebody that's had a really privileged background, but then it has gone and done the Kokoda challenge. You know what I mean? They've gone and done something where they've really put themselves out of their comfort zones. That's going to then be, okay, this person knows that they're privileged, but they're still willing to challenge themselves. And that's what I would look for. Yeah.
And look, obviously with COVID, those experiences, haven't been available. There haven't been opportunities to volunteer and travel overseas. I mean, personally, I think working in any role where you are dealing with the public will also provide you with fantastic examples, whether it's working at Coles, working at a bakery, working in fast food. You're going to be able to provide examples of managing conflicts, dealing with complaints, adapting your communication, working in a team, working under pressure. I recently had dinner with a lady who is on the panel at one of the fairly high-profile organizations, and she said, that is definitely one of the things that she looks for, is anyone who's worked in retail or customer service and are able to deal with the public and communicate and build relationships. So I thought that was an interesting insight.
Yeah, absolutely. I was thinking about it this morning. As a swimming teacher, which is an option for a lot of young people, you don't need to have qualifications and degrees or anything to be a swimming teacher, but it is one of those things where you are really challenged on it, every day. You've got parents kind of just watching you with hawk eyes, and they've paid for their little darling to do their swimming lesson. So there's a lot of customer service, there's a lot of dealing with conflict, there's a lot of lessons that you can learn from these experiences. And I always used to say to, I went out on campus and ran interview skills workshops, and I used to say to them, waitering is one of the hardest things you can do. Like from a day-to-day basis, you are running off your feet, you are dealing with angry customers, you're learning so many skills that are going to be so relevant and useful in the corporate world.
Graduate recruitment has changed quite a lot over the years, particularly with the use of technology. So we now have video interviews, there's now gamification, there's assessment centres that have been done virtually in the last 12 months. Have you got some comments, or even to explain, I guess, what some of those processes involve and what recruiters are actually looking for?
Yeah, so and your earlier question is how can we help graduates get through these assessment centres? And I suppose the first thing that we can do is really help them understand what the recruiter is looking for. So really understanding what are they basing their decisions on is the first thing that's going to help you through that process. And then, I did a contract at some point when we moved to Australia for Fusion, based in Melbourne, and a lot of the grad recruitment is outsourced to Fusion. And I was screening loads of video interviews, and I learned so much from doing that. I mean, I must have watched more than 1,000 of them in one little short stint. And what we can really help with is that just understanding how easy it is to get those wrong. So showing up and not wearing the right attire. Sometimes people think, well, it's I'm just at home and I'm just going to be filming myself, so they don't take the care to make sure that they're presented adequately in the right dress. Or I have had students doing their video interviews and they've got their housemates walking behind them, or they've got like really obscure pictures on the wall that shouldn't be there. Just distractions, and or they've been given a 3-minute time allocation to answer their question and it cuts them off and they're only halfway through. So there's so many technical aspects of the digital process that we can coach graduates to help them not fall short at those points. Other ideas that I can think of, gamification is something that if you've never really experienced and you don't know what's coming, you could be knocked out without ever even having the chance to have a face-to-face conversation with somebody. So you could have done everything to make you the most amazing graduate, but you fall short in the program like that. So, really giving a sense of what that experience is going to be like. There's lots of places where you can go and do some practice. So, allowing our graduates to know where those channels are and where they can practice. And the case studies are another level of something that is new. And if you haven't had the experience, it can be really challenging. But we have so many resources available to practice those things. So we can really help to give the confidence that when they go through those assessment centers, even though we don't know exactly how it's going to play out on the day, they've been through something similar before, and it's all about showing up with confidence. That's what we really want to instill, that they've got the confidence to navigate something that is a little bit ambiguous on the day.
Yeah. And look, I think that those assessment centers have become a lot more sophisticated. I think in my time we were, building a pyramid with, I don't know, paper or something.
Marshmallow towers.
Yeah. And look, I would have really struggled with the case studies. I don't think I would have known where to start with those. So I would have definitely needed your help, Lyndsay. Well, Lyndsay, it's been an absolute pleasure. I guess just based on your own experience and particularly having to reevaluate your career due to illness, what advice would you have for other people who have had to perhaps change career course due to either physical or mental health challenges?
Yeah. So I've got, 4 or 5 key points that I think will really help somebody navigate through that process, which is a really tough time for people. So the first thing is to really be able to be kind to yourself. And, a lot of people attach themselves to their job or their work or their successes. And it's to remove that attachment and be kind to yourself and love yourself for who you are, not what you've done in the past, I would say, is the first point. The second point is to know that in that time you're not alone. So there are many other people that go through similar challenges, and a lot of people don't talk, so that makes it challenging, not knowing that other people have gone through it. But sometimes opening up yourself allows you to hear other people's stories and know that you're not going through the challenging time on your own. And I think the third thing is to know that there are always options. And that's, I think, where we can really help at Relaunch Me. Is what I did was to really strip back and understand what my strengths were, where do I get energy from? Because in any health situation, you're generally struggling with energy at the end of the day. So figuring out what gives you energy is going to be on the right path to feeling better. So understanding what your strengths are, what your transferable skills are, what gives you energy, and packaging that together to form your new path is always possible. The only thing that really stops us from getting there is fear. And so helping somebody get over that fear, understanding that there are many options out there, and it's just about how do you navigate through that.
Excellent advice, Lyndsay. Thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on the podcast. And if anyone is interested in getting Lyndsay's wonderful help, preparing for interviews, career coaching, or assessment centres, you can find her on our website. Thanks, Lyndsay. Have a lovely day up in Noosa. I'm very jealous. I wish I could jump on a plane and come and spend the day with you.
Thanks, Leah. You will have to come and visit soon. With the rest of Melbourne that's moving to Noosa.
Yeah, watch out. We'll all be up there, I think, as soon as we can. So, look, thanks again, and it's been a pleasure talking to you. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Relaunch Your Career. If you did, please subscribe, share with your friends, leave a review, or connect with us on social media at Relaunch Me Career Consulting. If you have any questions about the episode or the work that we do, then contact us via the website relaunchme.com.au. Thanks for listening. Have a great day.